Morning, everyone. As Diani has said, we'll be hosting a panel discussion, and the topic of the discussion is how to leverage on big data for South African innovation. So it contributes to many things, right, which includes social response, mobile app development, smart cities, and also machine learning. So we're just going to be hosting a discussion in terms of where are we in South Africa, and in terms of utilizing big data, and are we actually using big data for innovation in South Africa? So before we carry on, I'm just going to give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hello. Good day, everyone. My name is Paul. I am representing Engineers Without Borders South Africa and UP. Basically, Engineers Without Borders is an international organization that applies engineering knowledge to impart skills in communities and basically, find problems that we can help by applying our skills. I am currently doing my final year in mechanical engineering. I was a 2015 chairperson of Engineers Without Borders UP. I'm currently serving and on the board of directors for Engineers Without Borders South Africa. So yeah, that's me.
Good day. My name is Jacob Masingi. I'm a young scientist. I've studied electrical engineering at Tshwane University of Technology. Currently, I'm busy with my master's, and I'm running 2 companies, a MEMT group project as well as Bones Electronics, where we deal with ICT, as well as a MEMT group project, we deal with engineering, as well as mechanical, electronics, electrical, as well as fitting and turning. So what I do mostly, I deal with projects from mining sectors, as well as local municipality, where I provide energy measurement and verification. Energy measurement and verification, I collect data from a system called GPRS. I use GPRS network to collect data from the system. Energy measurement verification system. So also I work as an engineering workplace coach at Glencoe Mine, where I create platform, I train students P1 and P2 as well as artisans. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Dr. Vukosi Madavate, and I'm a senior researcher at the CSR, mostly concentrating on the kind of data mining, data science areas, and have a background in machine learning, computer science, and electrical engineering. Most of my work just really entails dealing with kind of solving either finding patterns within data, finding data that shouldn't be there, so looking for anomalies, and then looking at kind of projects on how we can actually get to enhancing decision making using data.
Okay, thank you. So, Vukosi, then, big data is a buzzword that's being used quite a lot now. And if anybody in this room doesn't know what big data is, what description would you give that what is big data and how do people get access to it?
So I think normally it's a tough one because I think some of these words end up being commercial keywords, and then everybody says they're doing big data. But then I think if you say, I think it's a triple or quadruple V's. So normally it's the volume, like the amounts of data that people actually are processing. So if you just think, for example, how many, there's a billion people that are on Facebook. So if you just think about one Facebook post and then multiply that by a billion. So, and then that's only happened within within a minute or 2 minutes, and then you then extrapolate that people are putting up pictures, they're putting up video. All of that means that there's a large amount of storage, and there's also large amounts of data that's just streaming within there. So it's this volume, the variety, also the velocity, how fast it's actually coming in. And as such, what it's actually created is a challenge on how do we deal with this type of data. So it's not simply the storage, but then also if you then want to actually build systems that can actually consume this data to either do analysis or do something for you. So a simple thing is, let's think about Twitter. Twitter gets millions of tweets being sent every few minutes. So if you think about now just counting how many tweets there actually are, you have to come up with a new kind of way of just counting, so that you can count all those things that are actually coming through there. So it's not easy, even like adding somebody following you, keeping track of all of that becomes much more harder. Because nobody really wants to use a system that takes 5 minutes to give you a response after you've actually given a request. But we all expect it to be instantaneous.
Okay, and then Jacob, because you raised the very valid facts about there is so much data and we need to find a way to actually utilize that data. So how would you say that in your industry, how is the data being collected? And how are you guys getting value from the data that is being collected?
Yeah, as I have said, that we in our industry we deal with energy measurement and verification. So what basically is happening in energy measurement and verification, we develop the system, like we build the system, and that system we use sensors to collect data. And at a certain time we use servers, or either we use GPRS to collect that data. So what we do is that we build data from each and every household. Let's say, for example, I was working on the project of solar water heating system, where I've created a system where I'm taking data from that system to see the consumption of energy as well as the consumption of water. To assist ESCOM as well to know the peak and off-peak, where people use a lot of energy as well as where people that are not using the energy. So basically, the research was based on developing that system to collect the data at a certain time to assist ESCOM about energy audit, as well as energy savings and energy consumption, and as well as to assist them about using efficiency application at home, like renewable energy as well as light efficiency, those light that they can consume simple energy, as well as advising them as well about using, because most of the household they are using electric geysers as well. Like we were motivating them on that, by creating that system, we were comparing between the solar water heating system as well as the electric heating system. So basically the data that we were getting from that system, we were comparing that data, as well as it was useful to the users as well, because we find that the users, they are paying what they are not using. Basically, that's where we also advise them. We develop the switching system, automation home system, where we know that we can control that home appliance everywhere where you are. And we have also developed those as smart meters, like they work as smart meters as well, to collect that data. So this data is very useful because at the end of the day, we get the data, then we create baseline profiles where we advise users as well as we assist ESCOM to implement energy saving means in our country.
All right, thank you for that. And then Paul, would you say that the benefits of big data are being realized in South Africa?
Well, coming from EWB side as an organization that is based primarily on community engagement, and if you can see on our banner there, our slogan is literally empowering communities. The way that we like to look at our data is figuring out, we do use data a lot in terms of when you get into a community, you have to understand what the needs are. And it is important for us to be able to collect the right kind of data. Now, taking into context within our country, I actually went on and I put a few points down just thinking about how data is basically used within our country. And there's quite a bit here, but I just go through, for example, predicting the unrest. Within the last year, there was an intense amount of, strikes from both the state and the public, from the private sector, companies and employees just going crazy, literally losing their minds over small petty things that could have been handled by simply considering the data that was already pumped within the public domain. Reducing unemployment. Using this data, I don't think South Africa has issues, and I don't think they're really tapping into the resources that they have. And data is one of these huge resources that we do have. Like he said over there, we imagine 1 billion tweets going out concerning a matter, and if we cannot capitalize on the information, the data that's being put out there and say, hey, here's a problem, that's how we're going to go about avoiding it. All those strikes could have been easily avoided. And the reason why I'm taking the social aspect of this, because that's what we do as EWB, we look at how information affects people and how the data can be used to help people. So all those strikes could have been avoided. reducing unemployment. We can look at the information and see why is there unemployment? Why isn't our education system working? What do we need to look at? What do we need to change? Is it the students? Is it the education system? Is it the content? Is it the books? Is it the publishers? Is it the location where people are learning? Where is the problem? And all this is dark. It's deep within the information that is out there. The solutions are available. And I don't think South Africa is doing enough to unearth these solutions. They're not doing enough to actually look for these solutions within it. And one of my favorite ones is probably energy, and how we recently had a discussion panel ourselves as EWB just discussing energy and how South Africa can better itself in terms of energy. And I did some research and I found that there are a lot of countries in the world that have taken advantage of big data as it is. For example, there's a city in Memphis. Memphis in 2006 implemented a crime predicting software that allowed them to reduce their crimes, serious crimes, by 30%. We're not talking about petty crimes of, violating a traffic law or anything here. We're talking about serious crimes. And they managed to reduce that by 30% by simply using data that was available to them. We all watch movies. We've seen how the CIA does all their whatnot and whatnot, be it fictional or not. It is possible. We can see that there is a scope for something like that to happen. And the city of Portland, as what they did is they optimized their traffic lights within the country. They optimized the traffic lights such that they depending on what time of hour it was during the day, the traffic lights could then figure out which at what ratio they should be going green and red. And by doing this, they managed to emit over 157,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That is the equivalent of removing 30,000 cars off the road by simply analyzing data and realizing here's a problem and here's how we're going to go about solving it. Others include, saving energy. Literally 35%, the countries that save over 35% in energy by simply just regulating street lights and looking at where energy is required and how to use it optimally. So clearly South Africa does have the scope, and it is there for us to build and grow and use this data better, but it hasn't been realized yet, and that gap does exist. So in my opinion, I think the government still has, and not the government alone, but the people, the private sector, the government, and basically us, we have a lot to do, because the data that we feed in, like for example, if I can think about a few years ago, if you wanted to read the news, the first thing you probably do is pick up a newspaper or log onto a website and find a news article. Today people, I read an article a while back that people depend more on Twitter for news than they do on actual news sources. They depend on Facebook more for news than they do on actual news sources. So people aren't going on the internet looking to say, hey, what's happening in the world? No, they're looking at Twitter. They're looking at the information that we are putting into the platform to see what's going on. So if we can use these platforms, if the country can use these platforms to educate, basically, to figure out how we can get the right information out there, educate people how to get the right information. Because the pool is huge. It is a huge pool of information that is out there, and the data range is huge. It's basically just figuring out what is relevant and what isn't. So perhaps we need to figure out how we can get South Africa to a point where we can identify what is relevant and what isn't relevant, and then we can use that to better our country. So is the data being used optimally within South Africa at the moment? I would say it depends. It's not really a straightforward yes or no.
Okay, and you raised a very interesting fact about people going on Twitter to get the news, and you see a lot of the times now when you actually watch the news, you're just getting a Twitter feed or a Facebook feed, and I guess the issue would then come up where we've had a lot of incidences where the news have reported things that people have tweeted that were actually false, but that's a discussion for another day. So if you could give the mic back to Jacob. I mean, you've told us how you guys use data, and it's actually very important because it's energy related, and winter's coming up and hopefully not load shedding. But do you think that the capacity to manage data in terms of collecting, cleaning, availability, storage, access, and integrity, that was quite a mouthful, but do you think that the data is actually being managed properly to be able to use it constructively?
Yeah, currently what is happening is that we are working together with RTE, is a real-time energy. The real-time energy, they have implemented the database. We are using their database to manage our energy. So what is happening because as we work as electrical engineers, so what we do, we develop those monitoring systems, we develop sensors that can also live with that system. And they also assist us about managing that data, so that that data can be kept very, very safe, as well as that data can be used. Because at the meantime, what we do, like we focus on different incomes families, like low income families, middle income families, as well as the high income families. So what we do mostly, we assist the lower income families using that data to implement solutions, so that we can also assist them to get funding, so that they can implement those solar water heating system or solar home system. So basically the data, I think that the storage of the data is very important, because when we store that data, we can use it in a near future, because it's very important to store the data. If we don't store that data, eventually it's going to get lost, and at the end of the day, we are not going to use it more effective for the future generation. So we have developed this system online for RTE system. The system is online. As we have developed the Excel, where we create the database, there we store our information. That database is linked with our monitoring system. We link that Excel with the monitoring system. That information that you get from the system, the user also, they can create the password there to access that data there, so that they can use that data for more productive things, so that we can give more solutions. Because immediately we get that data, then we sit down, then we create solution. How can we use this data so that it can benefit the community, as well as it can benefit the people? As I'm speaking now, we are busy at Droncorp community, where we are trying to develop them 150 megawatts. So like we have done the data, we have done all the survey and everything on that community. So after doing the survey, then we have managed to see how many people in the community and how many people are working, how many people are not working. So that data we have collected, at a certain time we have used that data to write the proposal to energy department, so that, okay, we have these people, they're not working, and at a certain time we have these people, we can develop such business in the community. By using that data, we can create more opportunities for young people, so that they can be involved in the business. But mostly, as we were focusing on energy, until Diane introduced me to this ICT platform, where we can also use this data more effective, so that more people, they can benefit from the data that we are using. So basically, what I can say is that we still need more young people, especially in renewable energy. Because especially for ICT people, because they are the one that they can also develop more server or more database, because as we don't have that skills to develop database. But if we can have more people in ICT to assist us by developing a database, as well as where we can capture our information, where we can get data for energy, so that us will give more creative solution on that platform as well.
Okay, thank you. So, Bukosi, I've got the question is sort of broken up into two, right? Firstly, how important is data to machine learning? I mean, would machine learning be possible without the availability of the data? And does the amount of data available actually impact the accuracy of the machine learning? That would be the first part. And then secondly, I'd ask, what should people in the machine learning industry be looking out for that is different? So maybe everybody's looking at the same thing and they should sort of be going towards another direction.
I guess I'll start with the second part. The second part, it's like very hard. It's like saying people who look at electricity, what they should they be doing differently. So that's way beyond my scope. You look at the specific things. It becomes a philosophical question about how people do science and in the machine learning and AI space. So that's still an open problem. How we're going to do it is not going to be thing. just to take like a bit of a detour. One of the things I think we should appreciate before I talk about machine learning and data is that if we're saying it's not necessarily about us being able to exploit big data, but it's us being able to exploit any data at all. So one of the things I've noticed over the last year or so when looking at people, everybody's going and building apps on mobile phones, on websites and all those things. But people have to get the appreciation that you can do more than just simply offer a service where it's just somebody goes in and they see some information or they buy something. But if you look at all these large companies, even in South Africa or internationally, all of them are doing some data crunching in order to enhance their services. And that's what they said. The reason that you go back to them, a lot of people use Uber, for example. They're doing data crunching and they're doing better planning and they're doing better recruitment because they're crunching their data. And that's how they make their money. It's not necessarily it's because they allow you to go and get a cab, or, to get a taxi. It's because they're actually analyzing the data that they're getting and actually enhancing their service. So unfortunately though, in the South African space, to be able to do that effectively, you need a lot of higher order skills. So it's not simply like, saying that it's just going to be a developer who goes and does it, but you're going to need analysts. And to get analysts, you need now people who have master's degrees, PhD degrees, people who spend some time in that industry to be able to do that. So the problem is much bigger than just being simply, oh, we have the data and we can't use it. But how are you going to get the data, even if it's from government institutions? How do you get the data in formats that are useful? How do you clean it? To be able to do that is, again, not simply just getting a developer and saying they should just write a program, but they actually have to then have experience on what are the questions to ask, what are the things, so you need statisticians, you need mathematicians. So it becomes a much kind of broader thing, and yes, I agree with Paul, you're going to need the private sector, you're going to need government within the NGOs working together to kind of fill in these gaps and also building up pipelines that you can have people to actually do this. And once you've got some bits of these actually working correctly, I foresee having startup companies in South Africa that are really coming up with solutions, or even within the African continent, that are very different to what's actually coming out of the rest of the world. Because we tend to end up just taking whatever comes out of the US, like or Europe, and just use it, and then just saying, then we're just going to apply it here. But then there are challenges that we have. If you look at kind of the way that we deal with renewable energy, now we have the water challenges that we should be taking and then adding back into knowledge of the whole planet instead of us to kind of doing that. So on the data side and kind of maybe where machine learning is at the moment, yeah, we've now gotten more data, but at the same time, there's always, you need data to be able to find these patterns within there, but it doesn't necessarily need to be big data. So that's another thing, that why I said at the beginning that the big data thing has become this commercial keyword that people use. Sometimes maybe data is like an Excel sheet with like 300 rows, but then once you start looking at it, you start picking things up and you then are able to make a decision. Where machine learning comes in is to try and kind of automate some of those processes. But it's not just a hammer that you use all the time. You have to be very careful. There's sometimes where you look at, like we have situations where some of the students I work with, you have something, it's not just the rows, you might only have 200 rows, but you have 2,000 columns, right? So you have all this information that's collected, and you'll have some of these things in, like, if you go into medical domain where you're collecting a lot of things, but then there's not a lot of people that you're collecting it from. And now coming up with techniques to actually find patterns in that space is hard. And yes, you would like to have more data, but you can't. So that's why people keep on doing research, is that how do you then, when you don't have enough data. On the other side of this is that, yes, let's say now you have 2,000 columns and you have 2 billion rows. Now finding in there, it becomes computationally expensive. We literally every day are dealing with challenges within our unit where somebody runs out of RAM. We are now at the upper limit of what we work on. We're working on 64 gigabytes of RAM, of loading a program, loading the data, and then trying to then find a pattern within there. And as such, then what you then start doing is saying, okay, fine, we can't do it on one machine, so can we instead use 10 machines and split the data into pieces? So there's all these techniques that have come along over the last 10 years or so to help us deal with this, because we know that you can't load everything into your memory. You have to then chop it up and then be able to then do the computations in that way. So there's still like because of this computation change. But I guess I don't know how many have seen the recent work from Google DeepMind that had to do with the Go game, and most of that has come because now we can actually crunch data in a much more efficient way. That's a lot, and now we have that Go has basically been conquered by machines now, which used to be one of the board games that we couldn't, as scientists, actually solve, but then now it's done. And we move on to kind of the next challenges within this area.
Okay, thank you. So Jacob, a lot of people assume that big data is an IT thing and is limited to IT, and just they don't want to get involved from other industries. Like you had said earlier, it was Diani who introduced you to big data, and it wasn't previously being used. Why do you think that people isolate themselves out of that and sort of just leave it to the IT industry?
Yeah, basically what's happening is that I have realized that when you work with big data, like you have to think, it's something like a logic as well, because it's all about thinking, and most of the people who have capacity to think are people of ICT, because
Thank you.
yeah, I think that because they deal too much with logic. When you deal with like coding and programming, they deal too much with logic. Like myself, I'm dealing with electrical. So electrical is just basic things. Like I don't have to think that much. So I just have to take the system and connect and do everything. So basically, because what happened is that I also did computer. I started on computer engineering. Then I have also realized that when you do an IT, you have to think too much. Like you have to sit down and think and analyze everything. So basically, most of the people, they are afraid to work with numbers as well, because when you work with data, mostly you work with numbers as well. So that is the reason that most of the people will think that this thing is for people of ICT. Even myself, like I'm even scared, because at the end of the day, we develop the system. That system automatically calculates. We get everything there. We create graphs and everything from the data that we capture. So basically, we almost try to make things simple and to use that data in the sense that you don't create the system that is going to assist you at the end of the day to analyze that data. So basically what I did is that I created the Excel file and linked with the system so that I can make that data very simple to analyze. So it analyzes itself automatically. Eventually when I get that data, then that system automatically analyzes that information. So that is why I'm saying that this thing is for basically it's for people of ICT to assist us, because as an electrical engineer, I can't work on everything, because if I can spend my time trying to also work on data, then there are things that are going to left behind. So that is the opportunity that you also want to create. Even I have the idea of how we can use that data. I can communicate with people of ICT so that they can also assist. It will be a platform where we also create job opportunities as well. Because rather than doing everything, I will end up going mad at the end of the day, because I'll be trying to do everything, and at a certain time there are a lot of things that I have to do in my side of electrical engineering. But working together, because I've realized that this is a platform where we can work together to collect data as well as to partner with ICT companies so that we can work together to create more opportunities for our young people. So basically, it's not that it's for ICT people. So even if you, because this guy also said, Paul said he did mechanical engineering, but I can see he has a lot of knowledge on the big data. So sometimes it's also the interest on, also know how you find your patient, because it's also about the patient. You can find that you did mechanical, but your patient is in ICT. So sometimes it's all about the patient. So that is why most of the cases it's very important to take innovation to bring it to the community so that people they can understand their patient. Because at the end of the day, you find that people are doing the wrong thing, things that they don't like due to the fact of they don't understand. So basically, if people they can maybe relate to this data thing, then they can end up and knowing their patient and they can start working on what is relevant to their field.
All right. Paul, what do you think South Africa should be doing differently and how can we get the youth more involved in terms of unearthing innovation with big data?
Well, firstly, adding on what Jacob was saying, I agree with most of what he said. But the part of, limiting data analysis just to ICT individuals, for me, is a bit hard to kind of allow to settle. For simple reason, I don't believe complexity should be something that we regard as a handicap for anyone at all. At the moment, for me, I believe access to these basic tools that allow us to analyze this data is what's lacking within our day-to-day lives today. Basically, having the ability to access this data is a problem within the country. And after accessing the data, how do you use this data, and how do you know what you're looking for is correct? So I believe rather than a kind of stereotyping it and saying that you should be an ICT person to analyze this data, why not rather say, how can we figure out ways, get platforms to allow people to learn how to use this information, to learn how to use the data. That is why I appreciate what this organization does, Geekulcha, because you impart these ICT skills to other people, to give the everyday man the opportunity to have the ability to analyze data on their own and find their way around the information that's out there in the public domain. So I would rather say, in terms of who gets to analyze it and why people run away from it, we should rather figure out ways of how to get people interested, how we can get people to know that learning about this information, learning and gaining the ability to utilize this data can change your lives. We stand up every day and talk about education and how education is going to lead the way and how education empowers people, yet we stereotype and isolate ourselves saying that that is not for me. No one was born an IT specialist. No one was born with an engineering degree in their hand. We all have to learn, and I think learning is something that we should not rob anyone of. And that's why we have platforms such as Geekulcha to allow for that to happen. And in order to realize this goal of getting people involved and getting people to realize the importance of using this data, there has to be, obviously, like I said in the beginning, access. We have to figure out getting platforms. We have to figure out both the government and the private sector. We have to figure out how to create platforms for people to get access to the data. Then we have to educate them about it. We have to know that once they get access to the data, they know what to do with it. We are about 40 million people, if I'm correct, in South Africa. If you have 40 million people going at it, sifting through data, how much information can you get? There's a huge amount of information, but right now the educated percentage within South Africa is doing all of this, and it's sad to say, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot of people that are sifting through this data, trying to find solutions that can better our country. So rather, why not try educating everyone? Why not try giving everyone the opportunity to actually, contribute to the struggle of actually getting information and making our country a better place? We all stand up and say, our government is killing us, our government is doing this, blah, 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 blah. But what are you doing about it? How are you using the platforms that you have to actually, build the nation that you hope to see? Complaining is one thing, but it takes a real person of substance to actually stand up and decide to do something. With that in mind, obviously, the access to it has to be available. We have to reach to a point where South Africa allows for people to be able to use this data. Right now, the courses offered in high school, going back to high school level, when I did my computer literacy back then, the relevance was very little, if I can put it that way. It was very little, because when I came to university, I realized there's so much that I didn't know that I needed to know back then that I didn't know. So should we rather not? I'll say South Africa needs to figure out how to start from the basics. They always say the foundation of a house will determine how long the house will stand, or your foundation will definitely determine how big your house will be. You build a small foundation eventually. Obviously you can't build a big house on it. The house will not stand. You build a firm, strong foundation, then the house will definitely stand. So we should really look into strengthening our foundation, getting the education at the lower levels strengthened, so that when people move into the sector where they have to start contributing effectively and actually giving opinions that matter, they have opinions that matter to give. Because it's one thing to just give definitions of terms. It's another thing to understand the term and the definition that you're giving. It's a whole different way of looking at things now. So for me, I really stand, and I believe EWBSA really also stands in a point of education. That's why one of our main goals and aims as EWBSA, when we enter any community at all, the first thing to do is figure out what their problem is, not by imposing it. Figure out what their problem is, and then find a solution that we can impart back to them. Not by going to a lab somewhere and concocting up some huge experiment to come and tell them, boom, there's your solution, use it wisely. We go back, we sit with them, we tell them, what is your problem? How can we help? Then the solution that we come up with is a solution that they themselves can sustain. We impart the information. We impart the information so that they would not need us once we leave. We impart the solution in such a way that it is sustainable. We try to emulate what we would like to see, we try to show what we would like to see from South Africa in general, giving the people with platforms that will allow them to grow and to actually learn, because there is a lot of potential in big data. Sifting through that data can lead to a lot of opportunities in terms of coming up with ideas that can eventually lead to companies and creating profit from some, eventually lead to more employment, eventually lead to less crime, eventually lead to a better economy, eventually lead to a better country. So we should really concentrate on our education. In my part at least, I say education is where we start. Educating the masses and getting everyone on the same page. That is the way that we're going to use big data effectively.
Okay, and then lastly, and very shortly, just a question I'd like to pose to all three of you. What is a recent big data success story, very shortly, that we can share with just everyone? One example of either something that's happened or that you know of or that you heard, regardless of whether it's in South Africa or not.
For me, well, when I was reading about big data, some of this, the ones that I found is the way how cities, they refer to them as smart cities, how they're utilizing this data to make their countries and their cities more efficient. Like the example that I gave earlier on with the way they optimize their traffic lights, such that they reduce carbon emissions within the country and whatnot, and actually, contribute towards making the country a better place. So for me, I'd say the development of smart cities.
Thank you, Paul. For you, Jacob?
Okay, for my side, I think as like